now it's rolling. So how are you doing, Zach?
Doing pretty good. This year we've had a lot more moisture than last year, so about this time last year we had our well running dry and chickens running rampaging everywhere. So this year we finally got all the chickens over here incarcerated, I guess you could say. Well, the chickens we've had for a few years, and they're Americana. They lay blue tinted eggs, so it's green and blues and some pinks and such, which is nice, and they forage well. But last year we tried to free range everybody, and they pretty much ate every crop we tried to grow. So we were going hungry, let alone producing crops for market.
Right, where did you free range them to?
Oh, just everywhere in the yard. So
like, where do you grow stuff? Like right here?
Oh yeah, they would just go every which way and anywhere there's something green for them to eat. So that's the difference why we're looking to get into ducks, because they tend to flock and they're a lot nicer to each other. They don't scratch and dig up everything, and they prefer to eat grass. You know, they'll walk by even good chard and kale just to eat grass. So right now they're eating all the cabbages that didn't quite make it to sale. They got buggy. So
yeah,
it's a great way to recycle.
Can you explain the order of, like the pecking order of these things?
Well, the chickens all have their own pecking order, and then we've got geese in here which help to protect against smaller predators like weasels and things, and they tend to walk around like they're the police, you know, making sure nobody gets too rowdy. So unfortunately for the 5 roosters that are in there, they're all kind of suppressed right now. They're all feeling a little down. But we've got around the back a system where the geese and the ducks, the waterfowl, can swim underneath the fence. So they usually get out in free range, except that they saw me coming with a bucket of grain here earlier. And so they're all eating right now. But the ducks don't seem to have so much of a pecking order. They like to flock, they're very social. And if it weren't for the geese, I think the chickens would pick on them a bit more.
So what's the function of a guinea in the middle of chickens and geese and
Well,
ducks?
they just eat so many more insects, and they're very much more considerate of vegetable gardening. They don't want to eat your vegetables, they don't scratch anything up, they walk right between the rows really nice, you know, so they don't mess up anything, and they just eat tons and tons of insects. It's like their primary diet, except for in the winter when they want to eat grain like everybody else because they're hungry.
Now, and the cats, do they serve any functions?
Just eating mice and being cute.
Oh, nice. Do they get along? Do these animals ever have conflict? Do they fight? Do they share
Well,
like
the
little children?
chickens pretty much have a pecking order, and you can tell when the chickens were low on the totem pole are walking around, they have bare backs and like little feathers out of their necks and such. And they also tend to hold their, oh, see, there goes an escapee right there.
Oh, wait.
If you can see from that angle. She probably flew back in to get some grain and is now escaping.
Yep. So what is he doing up there?
Oh, she just figured out that she can jump up there and jump out. And
oh, right.
Yeah, there she goes. And now she's gonna go and like claw my zucchini plants and like try to dig up my new transplants.
Oh no.
So later today we'll try and catch her if she goes back in and clip one wing so that she has to fly kind of imbalanced and then they can't get out. But she's been a particular kind of pain in the butt because most of the time when they happen to get out just from rambunctious play or whatever, you know, they come back up here in the evening and we'll clip one wing and we put them back in and be like, okay, you're not a problem child anymore. You're in lockdown. She flies back in, so we haven't yet caught her in the morning or in the evening or anything.
So you know it's the same chicken?
Yeah, it's the same chicken that keeps getting out, particularly.
Do you give that chicken a name?
No. Every time we ever gave a chicken a name, they turned into somebody's lunch. So we had a few favorite chickens. Right now, our favorites are the ducks and the geese. There's just 6 geese, so they also don't have names. But
I see that they're eating some kind of green stuff over there.
Yeah, we just weeded, so we threw in lamb's quarters, and I had some cabbages, and I pretty much just climb up here and toss greens over. And I would like them to get their own food, but at least this way, you know, it gives me a chance to actually garden. It gives them a better chance to have more food because they just don't understand agriculture and, you know, waiting for a plant to grow up or anything. They'll just eat all your little seedling. You know, they're the tastiest. So yeah. So this is traditionally the hoops that you'd make a hoop house with, and we're just getting started. We're putting these plywood sides on it and then chain link fencing over the top. So this is the future coop. The trailer back here has been a long-term temporary coop, but it'll expand from 120 square feet to about 220 square feet. So it's a good size expansion to have a lot more ground space.
Well, can you tell me the landscape of your farm? What is where? So these are the silos.
Yeah, these are the silos for all the corn and the beans, and I don't really have that much to do with all that.
Okay.
And my uncle runs much of this, and we've got cattle over on the other side.
Okay, hold on a second. That is the looks like
They're mostly hanging out inside. It's a little sunny and hot today. And there's a few out there, I guess.
yeah. Is there a front, a back of the farm? So do you consider this the front of the farm?
Not particularly. This is where we're at a lot because this is our access point for the chickens.
And I take it that is your house right there.
Yeah.
Goodness. Not the kegs, but I can set them up so that at least you can see what kind of equipment we use in the process.
Well, we can do that in a bit.
Would you be cool with that?
Sure.
All right. And we'll figure out exactly where to do that so you can see it, because I don't know if it would all fit on the kitchen floor.
Oh, Lord forbid taking video of the house right now.
That's okay. We can edit it.
But this is one of my other main gardens, and I think in future years I'm going to break down to just working this 1,000 square foot in the front here and this 1,000 square foot garden in the back. That way I can work more intensively, and I'm sure I can get a lot more crops in. But we just built some beds in here, which was a lot of hugelkultur, which is to lay logs out and then cover them with a lot of dirt, because as they decompose they allow more minerals and organic matter down there to increase their fertility and to hold extra moisture. So
Where is the pond?
well, there's 2 ponds out here.
Okay.
There's a pond in the middle here. So these are hugelkultur beds running this way and around, and there's a big circle coming around here. And then this is a pond that we've made out of cob, kind of an adobe structure, sand and clay and straw. And we're thinking at this point we're going to put like a concrete liner around there, so that way we'll have some concrete with pebbles in it and such. And I think we're just going to call it a hot tub.
Well, you mentioned the word hugelkultur.
Hugelkultur is the idea of you make a big trench and you fill it with a lot of organic matter, a lot of sticks and logs and whatnot, and then you cover it over. And it starts off rather tall, and the first year isn't necessarily the best because it has to, the soil profiles have to develop, and everything's been disturbed. So right now we have chards and kales. There were radishes in there, which we pulled now. Getting a lot of perennials, like this is Idaho blue tansy, this here, which is a really nice plant. It's the only thing that survived the chickens last year, so that's a bonus. And it keeps all kinds of flying insects away. They don't like the smell of it. So I have some squash growing in here, and this is reported to keep away squash bugs and cucumber beetles, and I haven't really seen an influx of them in this area.
Because you plant this right here.
Right, but it'll take a while before this stuff turns into, like behind you, all this green back here.
Like that. Oh, okay, I see.
Right, so we transplanted this fuzzy green tansy into this area last year, and so now it's very productive. And we actually it looks a little bare because we just pulled a bunch out to transplant it, a few weeks ago. And they would have been a lot more successful if we didn't still keep having a lot of escapee chickens, because they like to claw at anything that's not perfectly flat. So every time I make a raised bed, they seem to turn it into a flat, barren wasteland. So.
Well, that looks like some kind of projects over there. Can you stand by there and explain?
Sure.
In the back, there
Well,
looks like a child gaming climbing center. The metal, is that the dome project that you were trying to build?
Oh, the dome. Yes, this has been my long-term project to build a giant dome greenhouse. And a lot of time last fall went into putting the top parts onto it, but it just wasn't working out. We had the next layer on, which starts to go at more of a 45 degree, and the dome should finish out right at about the top of the telephone pole up there. So we had the rest of the dome, the top parts hanging, but because of the difference between the forces of the top part hanging down and the bottom part wanting to force out, they just wouldn't match up without, getting some serious cranes in there or something. So what we also realized is that it would be so tall, it would be a lot of dead airspace, and it wouldn't be very energy efficient. So the plan is to, in the future, build, use this here, these first few layers, as kind of a fence. We're growing up a few vines on it right now, so it'll be a windbreak, and then come in a few feet and put what would be the top of it in as a lower dome, and use that as a greenhouse. So our plans this year is to use it as fencing for ducklings and run a bunch of ducks in there. So we'll see if I actually get to that, because this fall I'll probably be taken up with other projects like roofing the house and electrical and plumbing and things like that. So
Right.
there's always that to get in the way of farming too.
I think I see a chicken right there. Did we catch any ducks?
There's a few down there.
Okay.
We'll see them around one when we get in here. But yeah, we'll take a walk in here.
Sure.
So, in an effort to make it a little more people-friendly, trying to create larger walking path space here. Of course, you can see the evidence of the chickens. They scratch and dig all holes in here. So we have a few surviving tansies, but they like to just tear them all out. Anything that's easy to scratch is their favorite space. So you have to watch your step. It's a little up and down in here. Yeah, these are our zucchinis right now, and they probably have another week before we just have to pull them all out, because as insect damage comes around, it tends to spread sudden wilt disease. So you can see there's a few of them really dying off right now. So they probably have a week or two, and then new zucchinis, which we have gotten started like in the basement, will come out and just replace them after they've been gone for a week or so and the insects have passed on. And hopefully after we get our guineas out here catching all the insects.
So that you have to spot where the disease starts and kill it early.
Well, you could try that, but it pretty much just gets to be hopeless. So, we've had a few good weeks of zucchini, and maybe another week or so before they're totally dead. But if you don't watch your zucchinis every 2 days, you get baseball bat zucchinis anyway. So if nothing else, it's great chicken food. So there's no waste in the system, at least. If nothing else, they get tossed to the chickens. The more greens the chickens eat, really the healthier and better their eggs are. So.
Yes.
And these are doing well for the summer, as they usually do. These are chards, and behind them is runs of kale, and both of these will just keep growing and growing all summer long. So this tastes kind of similar to spinach, but it just grows and grows and grows. So spinach, you grow it early or late, and you just cut it, and that's it. And you move on to the next crop. Whereas this just keeps giving you tons and tons of good greens, and that's a lot of what we've been sowing on the co-op lately.
How come the chards don't get eaten by worms as much as the other kind of plant? Like those?
Well, largely if you see some of these little white moths flying around, those are cabbage cabbage moths,
Uh-huh.
and so they're eating all the brassicas particularly. So you can see that the chards do have a lot of holes in them.
Uh-huh.
But what we tend to do is look for the nice little leaves coming in, and we pull them. We just pull those leaves before they get all eaten up. And at some point, you know, as it's continuously growing new leaves, these chards will be nice and tall, and you just keep pulling leaves from the bottom of them. So you get a lot of chard out of one plant. And we like to, you know, this one, for instance, is very holy, but it's still providing a lot of it's still providing a lot of nutrition, solar power for the plant to produce more and more of the smaller edible ones down here. Like this is a chard that we would take and sell.
Hold on.
Yeah, it's hard to get in there.
Nice. Like when customers see vegetables with holes, do they understand? Are they scared of it, or do they think it's inferior, or are they okay?
Well, we try not to sell anything if it's got, you know, excessive damage in it. You know, so like this chard leaf is pretty shot, but then, you know, right next to it there'd be chards that are perfectly fine that don't have any leaves in them because they're just newer chard leaves.
Nice.
But yeah, much more goes to the chickens than goes to the co-op or the market or anything. So that's why we're thinking we'd like to branch into doing much more poultry and eggs. We're looking to get certified so that we can actually sell off the farm. So hopefully next year we'll have eggs actually at the farmer's market, and hopefully through this winter we'll be having duck eggs especially, and maybe a few chicken eggs. But right now, between us and our friends, everyone, our friends in the Lane family seem to eat all of our chicken eggs. So we can sell chicken and duck eggs off the farm without being certified, you know, which is the idea that people should come to see, you know, how it's produced for themselves. Otherwise, you know, you're going to have to rely on organic certification or the USDA certification on products to really know what's going on, and that costs a good deal more.
Like how much more?
Well, for the, you know, especially the organic certification, I'm not personally certified organic, but you know, you have to be inspected. There's a lot of rules you have to follow, and some of it's kind of asinine. You know, it's funny because a lot of permaculture principles are just outright you can't even do them. You know, you have to buy all organic seed potatoes, organic seed garlic, and some of it costs 2 or 3 times as much as normal seed, which is a pain.
Hey, I think the Guinea's having a buffet right there.
Yeah. He's helping.
Oh, cleaning the insects.
Yeah. He makes the rounds and helps keep a lot of holes out of these. Otherwise, they'd be a lot worse off. And that's why we've got a dozen in the basement that we've in a brooder that are, you know, they're pretty good size. They're feathered out, and we'll bring them out in another day or two and try to introduce them slowly to the chickens so they can kind of join the community. But they're perfectly fine being free range, and they offer all the benefits of free range chickens, because the chickens will eat a lot of bugs too, but without like destroying everything. And that's another benefit to the ducks as well. They eat lots and lots of bugs and lots of grass. They prefer grass, so we've had them running in the back, and they just mow down the grass and they walk right past the vegetables. They don't want anything to do with them. They're like, who wants to eat a potato, right?
Yeah. Hey, speaking of ducks, let's check out some of them.
These are our nesting boxes over here. We just got these set up. Oh, there are quite a few eggs in here. So this way we can reach in and grab some eggs.
Just like that.
Just like that. We used to have to, you know, climb into their coop and look around, and they'd be all full of mud and poop and whatnot. So
Now you can
this is a lot easier to grab a bunch of eggs.
I can just zoom in.
Oh, sure. So the chickens we've been working with are Americanas, and they have a blue egg gene. So you have all kinds of shades of green and blue and some pinks and some browns and such, because there's a lot of diversity. They're not the purebred Aracanas, which would have only blue eggs, but they're like a mutt breed, which is better anyways. They're more, you know, they're hybrids. They're a little bit more robust, and they have a variation in color. So
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought that blue stuff don't exist in nature. Like, you don't see blue food very often.
Right. It's, you know, they're normal on the inside.
Yeah.
You know, if we had ham, we'd have to get some of those new like green glow in the dark ones. We had, you know, green eggs and ham.
Yeah.
We got green eggs. I'll leave those for later.
Let me check out one of those ducks. Are they inside?
I don't know. They disappeared right before they showed
I
up.
see one.
There they are. Yeah.
I can't tell which ones are ducks, which ones are chickens.
Well, the ducks are the ones that have, you know, they're standing upright a good deal more. There's two in the back here.
Wait, I thought that one was a goose.
Well, that's a goose, right? The goose is much bigger. You know,
That one is a duck.
Right, the goose is like 15 or 20 pounds. The duck is like 5 or 6. So.
I remember you said that the sometimes they fight, and then somehow the geese serve as the.
Yeah, the geese seem to serve as mediators to everybody. So they protect against the smaller predators, especially at night. Like the coop is not completely secure. You know, raccoons can't get in there, but weasels will get through. You know, something the size of a half dollar. You know,
They're all screaming right now.
yeah. Here's one of our roosters right here. It's in the shade. Hey.
Okay. Actually, and then now we have a new human being. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Michelle Langhout.
Hey. How are you? What have you been working this summer on this farm mostly?
Well, we've been doing a lot of, I would say, preparation and cleaning up for different things. We've been doing, of course, the growing that we've been doing. We built the structures earlier, some of these that you see, the hoop house here, which is going to be for the birds, but that one over there, which we actually had the hoop set up a little further back, a little further west, and we grew a bunch of brassicas in there this summer, and some other things such as quinoa for seed, and some squashes which didn't turn out so well, and some potatoes which are still working. So we've been doing a lot of that and work for the to get us ready for market. So it's our first year really going to market, and that's what we've been kind of up to. We also just in general have a lot of cleanup and restoration that we've been doing on the farm, because as you can see, it's a lot older. The buildings, if Zach probably already told you, the buildings this whole farm was established around the 1840s.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a lot of love that needs to go into it. So we've been trying to do that this season, as every season, you know.
So what are you doing with this space right now?
Oh, I'm not doing anything with this space. So.
We kind of shared the space with Harvey, Zach's uncle, and Harvey is close to retirement, and you know, so he's been mostly using this space for storing various items that are no longer in use, as you can see. Excuse me. We have a lot of cats. But yeah, so it's a space that we're cleaning up, and you know, in the future we're looking to reclaim it in one way or another as a family, because we have to we work with the other family members. They have cattle over there. Harvey has the cattle over there as part of the feeding process, and then moves them over to the main house 2 doors down.
Nice.
It's largely a fattening operation out here. So the cattle live for a year to a year and a half or so, and then they're moved up here as like young teenager cattle, and they're taught to eat, you know, grain and get really fat and turn into, you know, heart attack burgers, because that's what sells apparently.
Yeah.
Weed patch over here is where we've grown most of our turnips, our beets, and many greens. And you're catching us now at the end of the spring-summer season, where we're, you know, pretty much about to rip out tons of weeds and rototill everything under once again, and prep for putting in fall crops. You know, start at the end of July. So.
Right. So why do you put the thing up there?
I've been asking questions.
I just felt like it. I have a new one, and that's my spare parts. I guess to commemorate about 15 years of a good handy tool up there.
Do you have any future plans about redoing the landscape?
Well, this was nice. You can see there's like circular paths and such, but over the past month we've just been harvesting, and now it's time to pretty much rip out everything and re-rototill. I'd like to just do a lot of landscaping with edible plants. So, like in the front, we have a kind of chard running around and barley. Created a bee pond up in front, which just automatically got sown with sunflowers that just sprang up naturally. So we'll pull those out in a little while, because sunflowers are pretty for a while right now, and then they get all lanky and ugly. So they come down and they turn into hugelkultur materials. But this is one of my other main gardens, and I think in future years I'm going to break down to just working this 1,000 square foot in the front here, and this 1,000 square foot garden in the back. That way I can work more intensively, and I'm sure I can get a lot more crops in. But we just built some beds in here, which was a lot of hugelkultur, which is to lay logs out and then cover them with a lot of dirt, because as they decompose they allow more minerals and organic matter down there to increase their fertility and to hold extra moisture. So,
where is the pond?
Well, there's two ponds out here.
Okay.
There's a pond in the middle here. So these are hugelkultur beds running this way and around, and there's a big circle coming around here. And then this is a pond that we've made out of cob, kind of an adobe structure, sand and clay and straw. And we're thinking at this point we're gonna put like a concrete liner around there, so that way we'll have like some concrete with like pebbles in it and such. And I think we're just going to call it a hot tub.
Well, you mentioned the word hugelkultur.
Hugelkultur is the idea of you make a big trench and you fill it with a lot of organic matter, a lot of sticks and logs and whatnot, and then you cover it over. And it starts off rather tall, and the first year isn't necessarily the best, because it has to, the soil profiles have to develop, and everything's been disturbed. So right now we have chards and kales. There were radishes in there, which we pulled now. Getting a lot of perennials, like this is Idaho blue tansy, this here, which is a really nice plant. It's the only thing that survived the chickens last year, so that's a bonus. And it keeps all kinds of flying insects away. They don't like the smell of it. So I have some squash growing in here, and this is reported to keep away squash bugs and cucumber beetles, and I haven't really seen an influx of them in this area.
Because you plant this right here.
Right, but it'll take a while before this stuff turns into, like behind you, all this green back here.
Like that. Oh, okay, I see.
Right, so we transplanted this fuzzy green tansy into this area last year, and so now it's very productive, and we actually it looks a little bare because we just pulled a bunch out to transplant it a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so can you tell me about your daily life? How is it like being a farmer instead of, let's say, a postal worker?
Well, it's nice to get away from the 9 to 5, and you could say it frees you up for other things, but at the same time you wake up at 4 in the morning and you go to bed whenever the sun goes down, so you're actually kind of stuck to taking care of all the animals. And plants aren't quite so bad, but we get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and we have to weed and find harvest food for the chickens and get things set up and make sure that all their water is set up. And
well, how come you don't wake up? How come you don't do gaming all night until 5 and then wake up at 12 at noon?
Well, that's what you get to do in the middle of winter. So.
Everything. A lot of what we do is really based upon the demands or the needs of the livestock. for one, and for and the weather for another. I mean, that's a lot of how our lives revolve around. I mean, like literally, it changes our social life, our social circles, but also, you know, what we when we can go out and do things. You know, we can't just pop out at a moment's notice because, you know, of course, with an office job or postal carrier job or whatnot, you know, you've got a set schedule, etc. And then at the end of the day, work is done. It's at work. And here, you know, there are demands 24/7. You know, for example, we might hear a ruckus outside. As we did a year or two back outside, and that meant that one of our chickens had not gone into the coop and was being attacked. So we run out and take care of that situation.
Right, 2 in the morning or something.
Yeah.
You know, you're still at work.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just got a guard dog ourselves like 2 weeks ago, and we're trying to train her to be a little nicer to the chickens. She likes to play with them, but
yeah, we're actually working on training her to herd. So a little bit of pastoralism is probably creeping into our repertoire as much as possible. I mean, what we do here, even among farmers, what we do here is different, completely different than, say, you know, well, Harvey, Zach's uncle, what he does, because of the fact that we do things mostly by hand here and using small equipment, if we use it at all, such as a rototiller or lawnmower. Literally, we harvest food for the chickens and the geese with our lawnmower by mowing the lawn, mowing the grass, and giving them grass clippings, which they actually eat, or we ferment.
Early in spring, before the weeds come in, you know,
Right.
I'm up mowing for an hour or two every morning and collecting grass to throw to them so they have greens.
So, if you cannot have a quote-unquote normal social life, what do you do?
Well, you invite people over.
Yeah, you invite people over, and you know, and occasionally we go out into town. You know, we've been talking about that at length actually lately, because I'm much more of a social butterfly, and so I really like to get out. If I could get out into town every day, I would. You know, and Zach is more, you know, he likes being home and he likes doing the gardening and having people come over and having a bonfire, which that's nice too. But you know, for me, variety is the spice of life, and so I like to go out. Well, you know, we've been talking, how can we feasibly do that? And so chances are, you know, I might be looking for some part-time work, because you know what we do right now is not pulling in a lot of income yet, you know, because we're just getting started. Excuse the cats.
Sounds like a scream right there.
That was the cats. They're just getting mad at each other.
And it's not some emergency.
It's not. No, it's not. No, they just argue with each other that way. But you know, for me, like either having like a part-time job, or you know, for example, doing the farmers market. The farmers market is an opportunity for me to get out to see people I haven't seen for a while. And doing that a couple times a week, and also I'm getting more involved with the food co-op. I'm going to be going to some of the meetings on alternate Tuesdays. And
so how, like when you do go out to town, how long can you stay, or
Yeah, that's kind of a problem, because we like to go out and do landscaping and such. We find that we're out for 2 hours and we're like, oh man, something could be happening. You know, so it'll feel a lot better when we have a dog that can roam around and keep an eye on things. But still, like 7 or 8 o'clock, you know, we're like, oh no, the sun's gone down. We have to go close in the chickens. You know, we have to close their door to make sure they all got in and everything.
So, would the dog be, do you have any concerns with getting a dog in terms of, like, for example, I'm just looking at these little creatures laying around, and then I'm seeing like, I don't know, 4 or 5 cats sleeping pretty peacefully.
Yes, they are now. And if Missy is out, and if Missy is out, she will.
They become
keep them on their toes. They run away. She hasn't harmed anybody, but she does just scare the dickens out of them. So because she's really new. She's only been here less than 2 weeks now, and so it's a matter of training and introduction. In the case of the dog that we got, so you know, even with new people too, you know, it's a process. It's just going to take time. And she's gotten to know one or two of the cats and does okay with them, you know. But
yeah, the lead grandma cat is like, I'm the queen of this house, and she's inside too right now, like, "Rrr," and the dog's, "Rrr." But yeah, they get along. So she's getting better with the cats, and we've been putting her inside the dome enclosure in the mornings, and there've been a few times when the roosters decide they want to sneak in there, under the fence or something, and play with the dog, which is a bad mistake for them. But she has fun, and we found that even if she does catch them, she's been really good at not harming them. She's just like, ooh, can I pull a tail feather out? And they're like, no, screaming bloody murder.
Yeah, it sounds horrible, but it's actually good.
Yeah.
Like, since when do you decide to, hey, I'm going to be a different kind of farmer?
Oh, God.
Well, I never was a corn and beans farmer, so I guess, I never got roped into that. And I feel like my grandfather, who was farming this previously to my Uncle Harvey, even he was like, he grew up in an age when he was young where there was horses, there were 10 kinds of crops out there, there were, goats, sheep, cattle, everything. And I think he kind of resented the movement to huge monocultures himself.
Yeah.
The only reason we even have to run cattle, in large numbers, fattening them, is because this 300 acres here, which used to be, a family farm for multiple families, to subside on, is now like a tiny chump change. It hardly pays for like the 50 grand you have to put into the combine and tractors and everything every year.
Every year.
Oh, right. So things break, and then you got, a combine costs $500,000, and you might make $100,000 on like all the grain all together up here. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, we have kind of an interesting story because both Zach and I have roots. Well, I put down roots here when I started school, but Zach's family is here. But we actually both grew up like within a few miles of each other in the Chicago suburbs, of all things. So he was here for several years in the first part of your life, and then later on was in the suburbs and came back. And for me, I grew up my entire life in the suburbs of Chicago, and I just moved down here in 2006 to go to school. And I got my bachelor's degree, and I'm doing my exit project. Well, I will be. I finished my coursework for my master's, and hope to be getting my exit project done. It's been a little tricky to manage my time, but that being said, for me, the process has taken a little longer, and it wasn't directly related to agriculture or farming. For me, I was looking into the voluntary simplicity movement, and I had kind of romanticized notions of what that meant, and I was thinking, I could do it with a lot of support in the suburbs and lead a more simple life, living within my means, recycling things, reusing things instead of buying new all the time, and just having a better impact on the earth, because I thought that it was important. And also I was very interested in issues of modern day slavery in the form of sweatshops. Which proliferate across the world.
Workers, our main competitors is immigrants. Working in California and then shipping it out here. So that's a form of slavery too, I suppose. It's very very low wages.
And I've never seen it as a matter of us in a sense, like them being people in poor countries being our adversaries as much as they are victims of a system that is just really messed up. And so, I saw that back in the late 90s, surrounded by a culture of affluence, going to a very affluent church and realizing there was something just seriously wrong with this picture. And my own journey kind of started when I crashed my car in 98, and I couldn't get behind the wheel for a while because this experience had really shaken me up. So I did a lot of commuting and a lot of riding my bike and taking public transit, and I realized that there was a huge bias against me, even in my own workplace, and against people who took the bus and people who had to, people who didn't own cars. And I thought, well, gosh, there's something wrong with this. The affluence is
any breaking away from the consumerist society.
So let me try to stay in the shadow too.
Sure.
So now we're all in shadow.
Yeah, get a
No?
sunflower in my. Yeah.
Yeah, use the sunflower to shade you.
Where do you want to stand? Like maybe over there?
Sure.
So, all right, hold on. So Zach, do you also go to school or?
Well, I
what's your story
was
then?
going to school here. I came out here.
Here
and
means Western or?
Yeah, I went to Western for a number of years, and I think I was in anthrozoology and anthropology of disaster, and meanwhile there were anthrozoological disasters happening here. So I decided, I really need to, the piece of paper isn't ever really going to do me any good in the organic gardening world. So it's time to. I learned a lot of stuff. There's a lot of good teachers there. A lot of the science behind what I'm doing now. But yeah,
Well,
get my hands dirty more.
That's for sure, right?
but do you get that piece of paper, or you decided to, hey, you know what, it's not really working?
I was like, oh, I've got like all these credits, and now I have to take, like math and English, and I'm like, and speech, and I'm like, well, this, all my core curriculum is still left, and I'm like, well, if I could spend the next 2 years working on that, or I can actually get down to doing, full time. It's really hard trying to, deal with things on the farm and then have to run off to school, especially when teachers are like taking attendance, and you're like, but a horrible disaster was happening at home,
Like what?
Like the first day I went into anthropology of disaster, we had just had a massacre of our first set of ducks. A weasel had gotten in there and taken out all but one, and I was like, oh my gosh, So
That's the thing with predators is
Yeah.
they're various and sundry, and they all have different ways of finding ways in and killing things. And so you have to like literally go from the ground up. The ones in the sky, which we haven't had any problems with yet, cross my fingers. The sides, the bottom, you can have a floor that you think is fine.
Yeah, weasels tunneled under the ground into the garage, which was all closed up, and took them out, and
Yeah.
And
it's
so we
not
realized
expected at all.
that the roosters were keeping the chickens safe, because the chickens have a habit of, like, when the sun goes down, they've got sundowners. They are knocked out. You can pick them up. You can do whatever you want to them. They're, and the
like
roosters
it's like they go
roosters
comatose.
kind of stay up, and like they yell at you and such. So that's handy. Plus they're a little aggressive. So if a rat goes in there, it could eat a chicken. When normally a chicken would eat a mouse.
Right.
But a rooster will protect them. So we had the ducks separate from the roosters.
And
We realized we had to
yeah,
get a
and you
whole
say
community
the
going.
roosters also, like, they fall asleep. They are the ones who have the sundown, or
Mostly the
The
hens.
roosters tend to stay up. They'll be crowing at 3 in the morning, and
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes.
They're a little bit more alert, I think, than the hens are.
Yeah.
Because that is, in a sense, their job, actually. They do watch out for the females.
So do roosters have weaknesses, or do they fall asleep too?
They do, to a certain degree. I mean, that was how I was able to catch chickens that were being stubborn and not going into the coop. But, it takes you have to really kind of sneak up on them, and they perk up a little faster than the hens do, I think. And like I said, I think that's just kind of the way they were, if you're going to go with teleology, that would be the way they were, quote unquote, designed, by nature, I don't know.
It's what works out. In
Yeah,
evolution.
it seems like that's, kind of their job. They are bigger than the hens. If they find food, they'll make a little sound to call the hens over so that the hens can eat. And they actually tend to eat a lot less than you would think. It's more like they're looking
the hen
around
has
for
to
it.
produce 5% of her body weight in a product every day. And so
Almost every
the
day.
rooster has to eat not even half of what she does. So its job is to be like, ooh, there's a good source of food over here. And he calls his little group of ladies over there, and they eat. And he eats a little, and he keeps an eye on the hawks around, and the surroundings. And yeah, it was very interesting last year, just watching them roam around, devegetating everything, just killing and eating everything. But it was very interesting, animal behavior wise, to see how they work. And now we decided, they're punks, so we're going to go with ducks. So,
Yeah.
You have taken on a new lifestyle. You said
Right.
there are a lot of restraints and so forth. Like, Do you hang out with other farmers who face the same kind of restraints?
You know, we
In
have
as much as there are other farmers doing the same thing, you know,
there's still few and far
99%
between.
of the farmers are really agribusinessmen. You know, half the time they wear suits and they go to their day job.
So they don't have to worry about their farms.
Right, they're not having to worry about getting back putting in chickens. You know,
not too much. I mean,
we have cattle up here. You know, so my Uncle Harvey doesn't even have to come down here necessarily. He has one of his sons maybe once a day, give them food, and that's it, and walk away. They don't even have to live on site.
There are people in the community. If you were to go, say, to the farmers market, you're probably going to meet people a little bit more like us. Although everybody's different. I mean, there's this Good Hope Gardens that used to be a CSA, and they still do a lot of production. And I don't know that they raise any livestock, but those who do would say yes. We've faced the same thing on occasion, looking taking care of our birds. Some people still choose, like if they raise livestock, they might choose to raise them strictly in a coop environment and not free range them at all. So when you make the choice to free range, that's when you give up some of your control over the environment to give the animals an opportunity to have a better life,
right,
and to have a better quality egg at the end of it too, or better quality bird if you're processing birds. But I just was talking to somebody at the farmer's market who was a customer, and she was talking about her birds and what they did with their birds when she was growing up. So it is a lifestyle, but it's not always easy to find around here. It's
so you can name the
vogue.
people, right? You can name
Right. There's not too many people just
the
yet.
lanes you have named. Who else?
Yeah. Oh goodness.
Good Hope people, you say?
People who are older in the community. I think that's actually a resource. If you want to actually find out who the farmers are, besides the people like us who come from the suburbs and have this
we're learning it
romantic,
from scratch.
right? Romantic notion of how to do it, and then we hit the reality. It's like, oh my gosh, wow! But there's still so much good stuff that comes out of it. Oh, sorry, Truffle. There's still so much good stuff that comes out of it. But I would say if you want to actually get yourself some interviews with people who have done this, say 50 years ago, or had a flock of birds, or had a different kind of farm, go to Hy-Vee on a Sunday morning. Not kidding. There's a lot of people in the community, the church-going crowd, that actually goes into Hy-Vee for breakfast in the morning on Sunday after church. And you probably will find a lot of, farmers there that might be doing conventional agriculture now.
But a lot of them
50 years
remember
ago,
when it was a lot different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of pining for that. But what can you do economically? It's this doesn't really hold water, except for the fact that I've got no rent, and we make our own food. And a few bucks here and there goes into gas just to get to the farmer's market.
Yeah. So it's a little different existence, and different people have different experiences. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Farmer John.
Yeah.
Angelic Organics, I think here in Illinois, and he had, I think, the support of an older farmstead and a lot more acres, I think, than this family has, to do what he was doing. But even he, had struggled to a certain degree with, figuring out how to do what he wanted to do.
Right, he had to go on a whole world journey to third world countries to see just how you do it for real.
Seriously, yeah. The journeys here are very different. I think the way that we connect, believe it or not, is sometimes through social networking, using things like Facebook, seeing different people who are doing what we're doing. There are forums like Permies.com, which is a forum, for
lots
permaculture.
of blogging and
Because one of the things that you find is that during the winter months, you're off season a little bit, when you're doing some planning and maybe repairs around the house, in our case, whatnot, is that you do have some time on your hands. I mean, again, the weather dictates a lot of what we do or don't do. And so we'll get online, and so we've started discovering that there's a community of people. And so, like the social life that you talked about, I think some of that, it's morphing, because we're 3 miles from town. And we don't necessarily have next door neighbors, although we do have one neighbor over there who's very supportive. That's within the family, married within the family here. It's hard to actually find each other sometimes, and so when you see something online, it's a community based upon interest,
Right.
as opposed to a community based upon space. So you have a little bit of the balance there, because reality is that you have to build your community network here based upon space to some degree. But when there are other people, if there aren't as many people to talk to in
Right.
town or whatever, then you find them elsewhere.
Nice.
Yeah,
Even though you never see them face to face.
you might not. Then again, you might. You never know.
Right, there's always, lots of interesting conferences and things you could go to. Not that we ever get there, but someday when we make enough money.
Well, you do mention that you interact with, 1, the lanes, the 2, the food co-op, 3, the Amish,
Yeah.
and you don't go to the Hy-Vee Sunday morning thing, but you know about it.
Well, we get out there sometimes.
And the Good Hope people and Farmers Market, right?
Right,
So
right.
those would be.
And John Curtis has been a cornerstone of the real farming movement out
Yeah.
here for ages. So
Oh, so he started a lot of this.
yeah, if you want to go, have you been out there before?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I've been there once or twice.
Yeah, that's a beautiful garden. He's got his system down quite pat. So
He's been doing it for a while. But actually, that is one of the things that we're working with the family about, because this place was how long was it abandoned for, hon, before we got into it?
At least like 10 years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't
It was
taken
abandoned.
care of for the previous 30 years very much. It was kind of like, someone needs a place to live, or it was a rental, and so it got abused a lot.
Yeah.
The house.
Unfortunately,
The
Zach's done a
first-
lot
The
of
first
work.
year I was in here, I realized that the sill, like what the giant board that fits between the foundation and the stick framing on this wall had been eaten through by termites completely, and it's like an 8x8 virgin timber, like out of huge, and it had just been completely annihilated for like 10-15 feet, and I had to jack the whole wall up by about a foot. So the first year I was here, it was like, you think a good thing it was summer.
Yeah, but we could, in any case, we could show.
Its grandfathered windows through the whole wall.
So how do you get rid of the termites?
They had died long since, but the damage had already been
Well,
done. And I think he also
by
had.
fixing the windows and not allowing any more
Yeah.
water in, termites need a lot of water to do what they do. And then I also inoculated all the ground everywhere around with nematodes, the good predatory nematodes, which eat soft-bodied insects in the ground. So the nematodes eat all the termites, which really helps. So I don't hardly see termites anymore, except that last year was so dry that the nematode population really went down because they need moisture.
Yeah.
And they're coming back now, I think. I assume. They're
The
so small you
nematodes.
can't see them, but
Well, can you explain the?
yeah, well, this is our newest project of working with aquaponics systems. These little guys here are blue tilapia, and the other goldfish were just the first fish we threw in there to start this operation up while we got the tilapia. And it was rather amazing because the tilapia came as miniature specks that we were like, those aren't fish. They looked like sea monkeys or something when they came in the mail. They were so tiny, just little spawn. And I think you could say they roughly doubled every week. And that was about 6 months ago.
So do you eat tilapia?
Well, not yet. They still need to double a little bit more. They're not doubling every week anymore. That would be insane. I mean, they'd be ready to eat in like 2 weeks. But they're a month or two away from a breeding population, so that we can have them produce fry that, say, next year we can take and put them into a large swimming pool and have a large grow out. And should be interesting. We still have to figure out, what do we really feed them sustainably? Grass clippings and duckweed and things like that. This is pacu. He's a pacu, which is a kind of South American fish they grow for meat in very warm tropical waters, where whereas these fish can be, the other fish, the blue tilapia, can be good down to about 55 degrees temperature, which is good because in the winter sometimes we're struggling to keep the place 55 degrees.
Right.
They get a little cold. But pacu actually came from the pet store just out of town, over by Ace. What's it called? The Pet Connection.
Yeah.
Right. She didn't want to have her giant fish in there. They were causing too much humidity and burning out her laptops. They were, right next to her desk and such. So we took them in. Actually, this goldfish and pacu here. So they've hardly grown, but they've been a source of fertilizer. So we don't have much growing up here anymore, but we had a couple of crops. We started seedlings in here. We grew some onion sets in here, and it worked out pretty well. So it's been a learning curve of figuring out just how to take care of heavy population of fish.
Right.
And now they're getting a little bit more cramped in there, and it's like, yeah, there's nothing but weird funk in there right now, which also doesn't help the fact that they produce a lot of nitrites. But those nitrites get pumped. There's a pump underneath the gravel, so the fish waste gets pulled into the gravel, and it starts to get worked upon by the microorganisms, which turn the nitrites into nitrates, if I remember correctly, and which further gets pumped up into the top and floods through the system. And this is a very, very simple, continuous cycling system. I've got some bigger tote systems in the basement, which are a little more complicated, which I could show you. But there's no fish down there yet. We have to grow up the fish population first, because this is July and we're busy outside.
Right.
And we've been busy outside for 5 months solid. We haven't done anything with them but clean them out and feed them.
All right.
But yeah, pacu's doing really well. He had some issues because he came from a tank that wasn't glass, and so it took him a while to understand the concept of glass, and he would just smash into the sides, and he hurt his nose a lot and was getting infections. So we had to learn how to take care of the health issues when they get ick, which is pretty much, they look icky. They get you can see that they have parasites or something. And what you have to do is raise the temperature up above 86 degrees constantly for 3 days, which is a little traumatic on them. They like their temperature at 75, maybe 80. Getting in at around 90 degrees, they're really a little stressed. And you can't raise the temperature too fast, and it's interesting trying to raise the temperature to 90 degrees in the middle of winter too, because it just heats right out. But that, and keeping the proper amount of salt in there, it helps them with their slime coat, which is their microbiotic coating that is basically their outer defense system of their immune system. And so yeah, they've been doing pretty good. And they're actually, nowadays they actually pay attention and they come swarm me. And we find they even recognize when someone new is here. So they're like the chickens, they're a little timid. They're like, who's that guy? Or even when the dog came in, they were like, oh. Every time the dog walks by, they run away. But they know who feeds them. And yeah, at this point we're just using commercial catfish food, which is not the best. I wouldn't necessarily want to even eat them, considering what might be in that cat food. So they're pretty much strictly breeders, and they could potentially produce hundreds of fry within a few months here. We get them into breeding tanks in the basement, which after we grow them out through the winter, we could then take those fry and bring them outside and grow them out to be meat fish. Even if we were to harvest them, they'd have to get 2 or 3 times bigger than they are now.
All right.
Yeah.
So Zach, this is your system of something.
Yeah, one of our other projects and trying to be more self-sustainable is the fact that we drink a lot of beer. It's good for you. It's liquid bread, even better because it's been half digested, and it's full of probiotics, right? So as we get through that, we've actually been trying to break down to the very basic level. We have grains growing outside that we would like to use. Right now, we're growing up a hulless variety that'll be easier to make beer out of, and so everything we've grown now will be a seed to grow a crop that we can hopefully brew beer out of. So for right now, we're buying, like a 50-pound bag of barley. And the beauty of that is we can buy the barley and we can make beer out of it and actually increase the nutritive value of the barley by the time we feed it to the chickens. And the chickens can only eat about 20-30% distiller's grains anyways. So, they're just happy to get a little bit here and there when we have it. But that means we have to soak it for a few days and let it kind of germinate. And when it germinates, it takes the starches inside and converts them to sugars. And we then have to dry them down very slowly, which is the crux of our issue right now. We're drying them without them going moldy. But still at the same time we're using, what's pretty cheap is to just buy the materials and use malt. So we use my pot here, which has like a false bottom in it and allows the grain to siphon out like a colander. So we can soak it and let the water out and maintain the grain in there. And so we use this for soaking it and germinating it, and then we dry it, and then we put it back in here later once it's dried off and it's been malted. You have to roast it, otherwise you just have grain, you have no malty taste to it. It's like that. You may as well have just taken a sack of flour and tried to make beer out of it, which works, but it's like rocket fuel and it's like, it's cidery.
Don't want that.
So I wish we had any beer going right now, but we've been pretty busy, and gosh, there's still beers in the basement, so it's not too much of a rush yet. We'll probably be working on it again in a few weeks, though. But what we do is we fill this back up with barley that after it's been roasted, and we bring it to a temperature 150 to 180 degrees, where the enzymes in the living barley break down more of its starches into more sugars, where the sugars then are converted by yeasts into carbon dioxide and alcohol. So we do that and we drain it out, and then we take the liquid, which is the malt extract, and after we feed what was left over of the grain to the birds, we then we have basically liquid beer that's unfermented. It's like barley soup or barley tea basically. And from that point you boil it for an hour to help break things down a little bit more. You add hops for flavoring or other herbs. Hops is actually one of a historically recent addition to beer. It used to be considered a very inferior beer herb, but that's before we had better understanding how to get more sugar out of barley or how to add sugar. And so old beers used to be very low in alcohol, and they needed all kinds of crazy herbs, to really give it a kick. And hops, on the other hand, isn't very active, as an herbal thing. It kind of makes you tired, sleepy, which I guess adds a little bit to the beer, unless you're trying to drink it at noon. Then we drink a different kind of beer, where we use like a sage or something, like a mugwort or an artemisia or some sort, and that gives you a more of an upper of a beer, so more like drinking coffee with a kick. But yeah, you boil that down, and you're making basically beer soup, and then you put your hops in, and it's like adding. You have to add a bittering backing to beer, because otherwise it's just like sweetness and there's got to be a backing to it. Otherwise, it just isn't even beer. And so hops is a bittering agent, and you can use any number of bittering agents to get the same effect. Like for example, some people are actually allergic to hops too, and so we've been making a couple of beers for some friends who are so they can actually drink beer without breaking out. which is an interesting thought. But yeah, you do that, and then you can, once again, you use the siphon here, so it's really handy to pour it out. You use a silicone tube which can deal with heat without like leaching plastics into it, and that we drain that down into a fermenting vessel, which glass is just the cleanest thing to use. It doesn't give you any off flavors or anything. And once this is filled and we've cooled the beer down, we usually just take this and put the whole thing in the sink or in the tub and just, you know, let it sit in cold water so it cools down faster. And then you inoculate it with yeast. And oftentimes we just reuse yeast from another beer. So we put a cup of beer that's actively growing in there, and that's better than anything. Though it has its limits. After 5 or 6 beers, you start to get weird off flavors because it's not the same yeast. You know, yeast is this society, this culture that keeps evolving. You know, and it'll evolve differently depending on the temperatures and different, you know, variables inside different houses. And also what other organisms get in there. But what it does is, you know, it's like there's just so, it gets going faster than other microorganisms, and so it keeps it more sterile. So there might be other wild yeast cultures or lactobacterial cultures, and they get in there and they add a little bit to the flavor profile, but they're quickly overcome by a strong yeast reaction. You know, you're creating a strong society in there. You know, a quick growth phase over a few days, lots of air bubbles come out of it, and then it settles down, and you know, you age it off. And so at that point, you know, we take this thing up here, and we let it, you know, we maybe stir it a bit for your first few days to keep letting it, you know, be active and diverse. And a lot of the yeast actually and other things sediment down to the bottom. So we then siphon off everything to the top, leave the funk on the bottom. We feed that back to the chickens because that's also really good stuff. Or sometimes I just drink some because it's so full of B vitamins. It's like drinking a Red Bull or whatnot. It's really good stuff. Sometimes it tastes really funny. And at that point, you set it aside for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, something, you know, as long as you can before you want to start drinking it, really, for an ale, or you know, or you lager it, which may take many months at lower temperatures, and it allows it to stabilize. It allows the different flavors to kind of get along better. Oftentimes, especially if I use like wormwood or mugwort, America Gale, things like that, like it's very strong and really incredibly potent, and like, oh my gosh, what am I drinking? Like for the first few weeks. And after it's set for like 3 or 4 weeks, it's like, oh wow, they've all learned to get along better together, you know, and the weird flavors kind of mellow out, you know, it's just like aging out wines. And so ales can be aged out up to maybe 6 months or so before they start, you know, the yeast isn't working so much anymore, and the lactobacterial, you know, organisms and things start to put really weird off flavors in it, which is not altogether bad. You have a sour brown or sour red, or you know, kind of sour beers then at that point, but altogether not something you want to drink every day.
Cool.
But yeah, then we take that after it's set for 2 or 3 weeks, or whenever we remember to play with it again, and we take it and we put them into these corny kegs, which are old kegs that they used to use for soda pop and such. They're about 5 gallons, and they've got a nice, easy open top to them. Unlike the great big kegs you might get at a beer store. Whoa, I had a little pressure. So the whole thing comes out. You can pour it in there. I don't even have to get a tube. You know, just chug it in there. Okay. Yeah, that was empty. And then close it up. One of our biggest problems is trying to make sure that that whole thing seals, but we're getting a little bit better at it. And you take that and maybe let it ferment a little bit more so that it charges itself with more carbon dioxide. So sometimes at this point you'll prime it. You'll put like maybe a quarter cup of corn sugar in there. And corn sugar just has more of a neutral. You don't really taste any off flavors. Table sugar gives you a little cidery kind of flavor. It's a little more raw. Still I'll use brown sugar just because. Usually, if I can, I'll get like the natural brown sugar instead of the brown sugar that's white sugar with molasses. And that seems to work really well. And add a little bit of flavor to it. Molasses is good. Honey is really great, but it makes it much more expensive in beer. But since we're growing barley and growing hops, we just pump up some water and boil it to sterilize it, and we could potentially make, many batches of beer for, without any outside inputs, which is really handy.
Genius, thank you. So this is where your kegs are.
This is where I put the kegs, and I can fit like 5-gallon kegs in there, which is a heck of a lot of beer. And yeah, so right now I just have them on a little leash like that and fill it up. Rather than rely on always having perfect sealing and priming it, I use carbon dioxide. I have a container here which fills them up, and that thing will last me like 5 years worth of carbon dioxide, so it's a big deal. Yep.
Thank you. So I have a last question to ask, which is that I come from a different place. I grew up in Hong Kong, and then I encountered Macomb. So what is your impression about Macomb as a place? What is your relationship with it?
Well, that's kind of vague, I suppose, but
do you want to stay here?
Me personally, I've been coming here ever since I was a little kid. I was actually born here. My folks are alumni of like 76 or so. I always thought that Macomb was just this podunk place out in the country where my grandparents had, nothing going on. I came out in about 2000 and spent a few months here, but not really getting into Macomb or working with the collegiate people, the intelligentsia. I still just kind of like, wow, this place is podunk. But then, as I spent, a decade not living in the suburbs, traveling all over, seeing all kinds of different places, I really realized that there's a lot of benefits to not living in such a metropolitan area. It's really nice. It's so much more peaceful. People are a lot less grumpy. People are a lot more willing to give you their time and talk your ear off and whatever.
That's true.
And it's been interesting, getting back, working around family. And, I think the Amish are about to pull up over here.
Yeah, so probably get a little eyeful of a different aspect of our lives when Harvey's people who work for Harvey come in to take care of the cattle. They'll feed them and make sure that they've got water and stuff. As for my impression of Macomb, okay. I came in from the suburbs, of course, and I think, as I mentioned before, I was a little disillusioned with the glitz, if you will, of the suburban area, and definitely the suburban sprawl. And so I was really open to the idea of being in a new environment that was, collegiate and and at the same time had a small town. Where I really like the fact that I could walk almost anywhere in the town. Of course we're 3 miles out now, so some things have changed, but I love that. I agree with Zach completely that the people that are here give you more of a listening ear of their time, and I think it's a little bit more complex. The social networks here and the types of people here are just a little bit more complex than they might originally seem at the surface, because they're, if you don't mind holding hands or something, just be on the safe side. But because I think that this is kind of a nexus for a lot of different kinds of people. I mean, there's the town and gown divide, like they like to talk about. We're actually on I think the western edge of cultural Appalachia. So, there's a lot of really rugged individuals here, and they take a lot of pride, and they don't like a lot of intrusion. So there's a little bit of stoicism, I think, and people who are really quiet about their personal lives. And you really have to be trusted, in order to get involved in a person's life here. And that can be a little tricky, but it can also be, I think, a really good thing, because when you do make friends, they're really good people. And and at the same time, there's also enough of a cultural life here, if you look for it, that it makes it interesting. I didn't know that going in as a college student, but as a person who's been around a while, people start to let you into their circles more, and you start finding out the gems of the place, and you start understanding a little bit more of the history. And
so many people complain in Macomb is nothing, or have nothing to do, nothing is going on and ever happen. But you say that there's actually something going on. Can you give me some examples?
The fly-in breakfast. The Macomb Airport every year has a fly-in breakfast right at the beginning of summer. I don't remember. It was just last weekend, was it? I think, and or a little before. And we went with John and Chanel Lane out there, and they give you pancakes and sausage, coffee and juice and stuff, and it's a fundraiser. And you get to see the airplanes as they come in. They're kind of showing off a little bit, and they have airplane rides. They raffle off a free ride or a few free rides, and otherwise, you spend $40 and you get a plane ride, which is cool because it's local pilots and everything.
Plane ride to where?
Just around. I don't know if it's anywhere in particular, but
a small plane. So
small planes. Yeah. They have some of the military planes, because of course Macomb also has a real military history. I mean, I think that the tracts here were originally given to people in the military after the 1812 War.
Lands and things.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of little things like that around.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand how to make your own things. I mean, when I really get to thinking about it, when I lived in the suburbs, there wasn't anything going on there either.
Yeah.
There were more movie theaters and more malls, but really that wasn't doing something.
They were
if you want something to do,
events.
I can give you something to do to have fun all day.
I think that's the nature of the difference right there. You hit the nail on the head. It's the events that are here are more community based, and so if you have your fingers into the community and you're involved and actually get to know people, and don't just restrict your circles, but actually start looking around and talking to people and just going to different things, even just going to the Hy-Vee on Sunday morning, you actually start finding out about the little gems. And also, if you go to the coffee shops, there's different things about concerts. Of course the university puts on a lot of concerts, and that's great.
I heard you guys just had an open mic last night.
Yeah. And
so overall, you feel like Macomb is a place that you want to be?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I was really thinking that when I came here 5 years ago. I was like, I'll screw around, I'll get free rent on the family farm, and then I probably just invested way too much into it, my time and effort. But I could see myself staying here pretty long term.
Yeah.
There's good community.
Yeah. If there were things that I would like to see changed, it's just I would like to see people being a little bit more open with each other. Where I come from, culturally speaking, it's more okay to talk about the things that aren't working so well, and and see how we can change them, because I think most people in the town want the same thing, but they don't necessarily know how to work together. I think cooperation, greater collaboration and cooperation among different members of the community with different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different political backgrounds. Ideally, I would like to see a lot more of that kind of effort going on, and putting aside the differences and focusing in on the things that are really important and that are shared values. within the community, because I think that there's a reason why different types of people gravitate here toward Macomb. We have international students, some of whom stay, they want to live here. We have from all over the world, and then we have, of course, people within the university set, but we've also got longtime families here, and we've got I think there's a lot of entrepreneurship that happens here, and it's, and I think that there's an effort to try and, if not sustain that, at least encourage it within the community. I think it's kind of a learning curve, and
so what are the things that you say people all want but they don't do?
A lot of people like the peace of a smaller town, and the perceived safety of a smaller town where they feel like they can raise their children, and there's people from the inner city who come to school here and then they want to stay here because they can raise their kids here in a safe environment.
Right. And the cost
that's
of
not
living
just there,
is real. It's not this huge inflated thing. My folks up in the suburbs have a house that's like $400,000, and down here that house is worth $20,000.
A little more than that, but
$30,000.
But yeah, you can buy a house easily, a decent house for $60,000 here.
No, but those are the things that Macomb have, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned.
How about the shared values, maybe?
Yeah, like you said that they don't collaborate with each other or talk to each other to pursue the same interests or some interests that they could be pursuing.
Music is one, I think. There's a love for music in this community. I mean, even just the bluegrass, for example, the bluegrass festival that's coming up. I mentioned that we're on the western side of Appalachia, culturally speaking. Bluegrass is a much loved genre, but not only among community of the cultural Appalachians, but people from the university can have fun with it, and I think it's kind of, in a sense, I think it's kind of an up and coming thing in this area. Bluegrass is, and people who are intelligent and folksy enjoy and appreciate that. So people in your farming community are probably going to enjoy that too, in addition to your younger generations as well. So there's music. People get together over music. They get together. They yell at each other about politics, unfortunately. But I think, for example, the drive for a local food movement. A local food movement helps people who are not necessarily making it financially to find maybe one way to at least feed their kids. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, we're losing a lot of light. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry there, but yeah, the local food movement.
Well, we personally hope to here work on more, ecotourism, have more things to do for people who are new to the area, and I really hope that both of the Johns, Curtis and Lane, that both of their things take off more with the students and things, because it's really interesting seeing how actual production of actual food happens. I think at least if nothing else in our country, we're looking at coming to a realization that the food we eat is all fake. It's all corn and bean derivatives and shit, which we produce a lot of that here. But I think there's a lot of potential for a permaculture movement. So that's our hope.
Well, and one last thing.
That's a lot of fun stuff to do.
Yeah. The spirit of entrepreneurship, I think, is another way people can get together in this community, because there are a lot of old-time folks who really respect that, and a lot of up-and-coming young folks, both from the university and the area, that really respect and admire. And I think in our current economy, entrepreneurship is really key for people to make it.
So that anything that can make that easier for people.
I think we just need to get the word out about the different things that are already in place, like your Small Business Development Center. MaidCo is more geared, I think, toward somewhat larger businesses, mid-sized businesses, I should say. Getting the word out there, connecting people with people from the Institute for Rural Affairs. Those are the institutions that are in place, but I think even more importantly, getting a network, having an entrepreneurship network here and getting people to talk to each other about what they're doing, what they want to do, and collaborating with each other on that level. And there's a bunch of nonprofits, and that's a slightly different animal, I would say, but the same spirit, I think, drives that too, with maybe a different purpose in mind. But I think that a lot of the same hurdles that people face and the same joys that they have and beliefs that they have and values coincide.
Well, thank you very much for everything we have done today.
Oh, hey,
Thank you for coming out.